Good afternoon, good morning, I suppose good evening, depending on where you're coming from. Welcome to today's presentation. Civil 3D 2026 was recently released. We're going to dive into the drainage analysis tool as shown here on the title slide, but just to get started, let's take a look at what even we're talking about. So in general, I'll do a quick little presentation of everything, then we'll get into the guts of the tool, do something live, and live dangerously, and then we'll have our questions at the end. Throughout the presentation, what we're trying to show today is what is new in Civil 3D 26. Dive a little deeper into the drainage analysis workflow that's new. Were there any changes to the objects to do that workflow? Are there any new things created to help do that workflow? All right, so let me dive into what's new across the board real quick. One of the main highlights of 26 as a new item is a 3D model viewer. For those that have used the object viewer, this model viewer is a replacement for that. They both still exist, but the model viewer is rebuilt purposefully for Civil 3D objects. So down in this corner is a preview of that. I'll take a look at that when we jump into the software. We can do partial surface references, so data shortcuts. Whenever we consumed a data shortcut, it was an entire surface. For some that are aware, there is something called a cropped surface, but that couldn't be used with a data shortcut. Essentially, they've combined the two technologies, and now we can do a cropped surface of a data reference. For those that are using the Construction Cloud and Autodesk Docs with your projects, they have become infrastructure aware, meaning alignments. So in my upper picture here, you can see I'm slicing a road. I can see what station I'm on. I can go to a station. I can measure station and offset, all those sorts of infrastructure-y type things. Now that's a road example, but that could just as easily be a stream restoration, right? Same idea. It's an alignment. And then there's some additional Dynamo improvements as well for those that saw my Dynamo webinar a few months ago. The improvements help with feature line control and, in a nutshell, also catchments improvements because of, again, what we're doing with the drainage analysis tools. So lots of fun stuff there. Small note, the drainage analysis toolset that we're looking at is in a tech preview or a technical preview, which really means it's fully functional, but just not all the pieces are there yet, and you'll see that. So that's fine. So what is the drainage analysis workflow? Again, just to kind of set the stage once we jump into the software. You're going to design the systems the way you always did, except we're going to have some new pieces to the puzzle. We'll have a pond object. We've got underground storage as an object, and we've even got open channels as an object. Catchments have been upgraded, improved, not sure what the word I'm looking for there is, added functionality to then assign to inlets and structures so that now the system can then calculate as intended. In the tool that we're going to see, we have to create our rainfall events just like we did with storm sewers or SSA or whatever tool you're using. Still have to do that. We can run multiple storms at once and then get a report at the end. So that's a very high level view of what's going to happen. So again, just cutting to the chase here. Let's get right into the software. So let's ditch PowerPoint and let's just jump right in. This is often helpful. So same sorts of information and catchment properties, but now we've got this runoff tab with different runoff methods. What about the object viewer replacement? Let me just kind of back up there for a moment. So if I were to select this pipe network, right, and right click, normally we would choose object viewer. But about halfway in the middle of this context menu is the model viewer tools. So I can add to model viewer. And just so that I'm kind of sharing screen here a little bit, only sharing the one screen. There's my model. And of course, much like object viewer, you can rotate this thing around and all that fun stuff. What's nice about this, it's much lighter, much faster, much more responsive. I've got some specific tools down here. Let me just walk through those for a moment. So what visual style do I want to use? Right, I can change that as needed. If I zoom in, right, you can see I'm going from different styles here. All things we're generally familiar with. What else can we do? Well, at the moment, I've only picked the pipe network, right? But let's go grab my surface. And I'm just going to be lazy and select it this way. Now when I right click, I can add that to the viewer that's already open. Well, let's zoom out. And of course, tilting upside down, now I can see my pipe network. Also, one of the often heard complaints about Object Viewer is doing this orbit thing. It would often cause people to go crazy because it would spin and felt like it was a table that was going away from you all the time. Not so. This functions as you would expect it to, intuitively inspect it to, I should say. So there I've added my surface, I've got my pipes. I've actually got an objects option here where I can choose to hide certain things if I only want to see certain things. Maybe I just want to toggle the ground for a moment to look at something else. So lots of really nice things here in this model viewer. And, okay, so let me go look at this where I'm going to stick my pond. There's a swale there already. And let's just go to the top view for a second. So I'm sort of rotated as well. There is a button down here to set view. And what that will do is will actually move my model space to that view. And now I can see them at the same time. So lots of coordination with this particular tool. Does this do the drainage part? No, but I was really excited about this model viewer. So I wanted to share that. What else do we have in there? Let's see. Oh, the partial data reference. I don't have that to set up. Maybe if I have 5 minutes at the end, I'll do that real quick. The infrastructure, I think I can. I'll have an example up there already. I should have done that ahead of time too. But if I have 5 minutes in, I'll show that. But let's just dive into the drainage tool. All right, and let's set my view back to normal, right? There we go. Okay. So nothing super fancy about this particular system. I've got a high point here and a low point here. So I've sketched some areas that drain to inlets. These are in sag, of course. So I pitched the system to kind of make it more difficult of a scenario. So it looks like I might actually have to dig the hole a little deeper. We'll see. Nothing terribly difficult either. I made the time of concentration 5 minutes for all the roads. And then I threw in this flow path for my larger area just to give me some more volume, just so we could see what would happen. Now, I suppose I should pause for 2 seconds. I am using the generic parts with connection points, just as a different way to do this. What does this give me? This gives me additional fields or properties of the structure in addition to those connection points than what the standard Imperial structure catalog has. We'll see if that makes any difference. What am I talking about? So if I go into the structure properties for a moment, for one of these, there are several additional property groupings that we just don't have with the original part builder parts. For instance, like the grade opening area or the road crosslip for the gutter. So some additional properties here. The bypass, so this one's in a sag, but if we're on grade, what's the bypass? So lots of good stuff there. All right, where do we do all of this drainage analysis tools? So just from analyzing this pipe system, we haven't got into the pond or any of the other things. I just want to know what the flow is in my pipe. Do I need to change my pipe sizes? What's the deal? So in the past, you may have used Analyze Gravity Network, which would do just that one piece by itself. Again, that's only doing pipes. But our tool that we're talking about today is this Analyze Drainage System, which is going to consider the pond. Once we create it, it'll consider the swale if we're going from pipe to swale to pipe. And even if we have underground storage in that sequence somewhere as well. So sort of analyzing the whole bit. The model here is created in Civil 3D, and when we hit the button to analyze, it's actually pushing it up to the cloud. You'll see that. So where do we start? So I pick the tool. It says pick a drainage object. Any of those things I just mentioned. So I'm going to pick this catchment nice and easy. It's on my other screen. First thing we typically have to do is set up rainfall. So I created a rainfall event for my local jurisdiction. So I'm going to start with this rainfall manager just to show you what's going on there. Now, when you create a known rainfall collection, you can call it whatever you want. We'll call it Chicago, assuming I can spell. And you can see as you put these in here, these become collections. And then for that collection, I'll add an event. So if this were the 100 year, right, you would name it that way. Now you have two choices. You can manually add data points to this graph right here using these buttons, or you can import a CSV file of the same stuff. What are we talking about here? Time versus depth. So for those that are unfamiliar, of course, NOAA Atlas 14 is a good little resource for that. So here, let me just pop that up real quick. So again, wherever you are in the world, right, come here, and here's your table. And really what we're saying is from 5 minutes down to 24 hours, you would take all these values to populate this table. That's really all it is. Nothing super difficult there. I did create CSV files just because that way at least I can recreate it if I need to, I suppose. But nothing super magical about a CSV file. So here we'll just import it for the sake of importing it, which let me go to Docs is where I have it saved. And there's my CSV. Let me just open it real quick so you can see what that looks like. Oops, wrong screen. I don't know what I did there. That's not what I meant to do. Let's just open it. And there it is. Those are just the ordinates that are in that CSV file. So time over depth, right, all the way up to 24 hours. And then you would click add. So you get a list of these, and you can decide whether or not to use those individual storms in that collection when we go to the analysis. So, maybe you're doing the analysis just for your hydrology study, or maybe you're just doing your analysis just for your pipe study. So in my case, um, uh, I'll just go ahead and hit create rainfall. So now that's established. So if I go to my particular rainfall that I've got set up, I've got 2 storms. And if we take a look at them, same data, right? There we go. So that's all checked. So now I can start to use that for my analysis. So the front page here shows those different known rainfalls. And of course, this would all depend on where you were and which jurisdiction for the project. So you toggle the right project location. So that's going to use my Lehigh County rainfall. And remember what I gave it for an input was I just picked this one catchment. Notice it highlighted everything, right? It's going to do the whole system. So here I do the fun thing of watching paint dry by clicking a button and watch it push up to the cloud. So while I have a moment to let some paint dry, any particular questions at the moment about anything?
So far, so good.
Great. I wish there were a way for me to kind of pre-cook this part, but it does calculate in the cloud, so there is that aspect to this. I suppose I could have had a second file that was already pre-cooked. What fun is that? Let's watch it blow up, right? Okay. Hmm. All right, there we go. So what do we have in our results? So currently I'm looking at the 100-year event for the system. So the total inflow across all the catchments, etc., you guys can read. Let me stretch this out a little bit. I do not have a 4K monitor, but clearly these dialogues were built on a 4K monitor. Lots of columns here. And as I go down, right, I can go to catchments, so I can individually see what's happening. What's nice is on the end of each row, I can zoom to it, and then I can see the properties of that thing. So some nice little handy tools there in the results. Same thing for pipes. So I've got some pretty large pipes there. I'm actually going to shrink this down just to see what happens. If I go to structures, I didn't mean for this to all work right out of the gate. I totally guessed on those pipe sizes. So what would happen here normally is, let me slide this over. You can take those results and then apply them to your model. What would that do? So for instance, with my pipe style, if I go to profile, maybe we'd want to see these properties. Right, so there's nothing there yet. And let's give them, some sort of color, just to pre-bake this a little bit, I guess. Peach, I don't know. We're just making stuff up here, right? And maybe I'll just change the scale there. So we'll see what happens once we bring all that in. So nothing's there yet. How do I know? If I go into the pipe properties, it hasn't filled in the hydraulic properties just yet. Oh, I should have hit apply before I did that. Just by changing the pipe style, it rendered things out of date. So we'll let that go for a moment. I'm trying to find I do have an example of a couple of those things that we were just talking about while this is cooking. So while that's cooking, that'll take a minute. Let me take a look at the infrastructure tools. So segue here for 2 seconds. So I've got a sample corridor file in a project in the Construction Cloud, and just taking a quick brief look at those infrastructure tools that we have here. So opening the file in the cloud, let me take a look at the 3D view. Again, nothing super fancy about some topo and a corridor. But what we have down here are civil tools to help us address or look at a particular alignment. So let's take a look at, that's Madison Lane, Logan Court. There we go. So there's my main road. I can step through looking at what's going on. I can actually slice it based on that station. And let's flip it. And now if I zoom in, I can see what's happening or maybe not happening with my road at that point. So that's the basic idea of the tool set. I can show or hide the labels. I can show or hide the station tracker. So that's that little beam that's going across. And I can make it zoom to the station depending on where I am. So let's just jump to the end. And then I'll zoom to the end. There we go. Let's go to the front. We'll zoom to the front. There we go. So from a location tool identifier, that's pretty good. The measure tools allow us to measure station and offset as well. So if I want to measure the top of the curb at that point to the crown, there we go. Anyway, so that's the basic idea of this. You guys can fiddle with this, but these are all new tools to help us analyze infrastructure projects in the cloud. Yay! All right, we're done. Now, so the point here is to hit apply through all of that. And if I take a look, you can see there we go. We're going to continue with results. Let me just hide that for a second. It's really what I wanted to do. So what happened? It updated the values. And of course, now that data is displayed in our pipe. Nothing super fancy there. Did I scroll past it? There we go. So it's filled in that information. It didn't fill in the flow rate or the return period. I just haven't connected that. Again, I mentioned this was a tech preview, correct? So there's some details still missing, but the parts that do work, they do work well. Okay, all right. So questions on this analysis tool, just from a pure understanding. Any questions here before I move on? No questions? Okay. Okay. All right. One thing that before I jump out of this particular screen, there's a sort of a button hiding in plain sight. So all of this information that's shown on all these different tabs, if you will.
Excuse me, Kevin.
Yeah, go ahead.
I couldn't get to unmute fast enough. I apologize, but Before we move any farther, there's a question of when you set up a catchment area, is the time of concentration automatically generated from the surface, or did you have to manually create that?
Great question. Let me hide this for a moment. You have choices. I am partial to doing it myself as opposed to letting it follow a surface. Not that surfaces can't be a good um, indicator of where water is going in a particular drainage area. I have found that the surfaces that I'm given to do that task aren't suitable for that. What do I mean? If water's going downhill and it sees an adverse slope in Civil 3D, and that slope could just be 0%, triangle face, it's flat, that time of concentration will stop right there. There's no way around it. It doesn't understand momentum. It doesn't understand any of the normal aspects of what water would do in that situation. It's simply following the slope of the 10 faces. So oftentimes what I do, and that's actually what I did in this case, I simply drew a polyline of where I thought the water was going to go. That's sort of the rough idea, right? And then when you pick your catchment, you can create it from an object, and that's typically what I do. So here, let's just do a quick example of one of these sort of these street scenarios, right? So it's going to start at the crown, go down the crown, and then be in the gutter for most of the way. So we've got a couple of different segments there, right? So something like that, and then all the way down to the inlet. So I'll come back to my catchment, create a flow path from object, and I'm prompted select a polyline on the uphill end. I pick that. It's converted into the object, but the polyline is left behind. So just so that we're not dealing with the wrong thing there. So there's my time of concentration path. If I go into the properties and look at that aspect, it does show the length, but if I go to this TR55 method, I can start to edit the segments. We'll close and save. And I'm going to edit a segment here. Oops. That was interesting. That's not how that's supposed to work. There should have been one segment there already, because it sees the length. And of course, doing this live is now failing because now it doesn't know where to go. It doesn't even know where the path is. That's interesting. Well, let me go back to the one that is working for some reason. Of course, doing this live, right? All right, there we go. So initially what you're prompted with is it'll make the entire length one type. And then you simply go back and tell it where that flow changes. So I gave myself my 150 feet and then made an angle point. So that was just in my geometry when I created the polyline in my soft areas, if you will. And then to change the flow type, you simply come to this option and click your particular choice, fill in the white boxes, and off you go. Again, notice I'm not using a surface. The other part that's a little unintuitive, let me just kind of go off in space here for a second. When you are creating catchments from objects, the first thing you do is you pick a closed polyline, and it leaves you picking. You're like, wait a minute, what did I just picked it? Did I miss? Just pay attention to the command line because it actually got the closed polyline. It's actually asking for the flow path right out of the gate. So I typically just hit escape to do it later. And then it's happy to move along and do its thing. So that's the only caveat that some people get hung up on. They end up picking the catchment boundary as the time of concentration too, and that can get a little wonky in some of the calculations. Cool. Did that answer the question, I guess, to some degree? Okay. So where was I? Oh, yes, the results. So this will just simply export what's shown in the results to a spreadsheet. So I'm going to call this version 2 just to show the difference of what I did earlier. And so if I take a look, where's my, oh, it's on the other screen, sorry. There we go. So, oops. Docs, we'll get there, drainage analysis. And there's one of those is my version 2. There we go. So let's open that guy. And you'll see it's the same 4 tabs with the same data. So this is just a summary of the results. Obviously, what's missing from this, the hydrographs for the inflow. I mean, we have the results for those, but we don't see the calculations that we're used to seeing. So that's just not in the report yet. Again, this is more along the lines of what Storm and Sanitary would do, where it's just raw data. And you can then format this any way you want or copy and paste it into your standard form that you might have in Excel already. So lots of different choices there, but that's the raw data for current conditions. Okay. All right, so what happens if we add a pond to this? Delete and close. So closing the view will permanently delete the analysis results. Are you sure? I have to in order to add more pieces. So yes, I want to delete that. So in Prospector, we have stormwater controls where we have ponds and underground storage. And at the moment, we have this channel object that is outside of that, which, I mean, I suppose technically it's not a stormwater control. It's more along the long line of a pipe network, but depending on the outlet end of that channel, maybe there's a hole in a box that's above the invert, right? So it could technically be a stormwater control. So those are our new tools. So let me just go ahead and create a pond. Now, a couple of ways to do this. You can certainly right-click on the object in Prospector like you're used to doing. But there are new objects up here in the Create Design panel for all of those types. So I can create a pond from scratch, just kind of picking points, or I can draw something first and then turn that into a pond. And again, just to kind of tinker for 2 seconds for what's possible. So since we're sketching, it's giving me a dialog. There's my name, some properties. How deep is it? What's my slope? What am I drawing? I'm drawing the top elevation. We'll say this is 105, etc. Hit OK. And now I'm going to start sketching the top of my pond. Oops, I don't want to go that far. So let's undo that last segment. And maybe something like that. And then we'll close it. Okay. So there's my pond. Actually, let me take a look at it over here in sort of 3D. And notice it actually is an object with a depth to it. Well, Kevin, there's hard edges. I'm never going to do a pond with hard edges. All right. That's just our first stab at it. What do we have? So we've got all these grips. There's a couple of different grips here to take a look at. So the center, or the centroid, if you will, that sort of slides the pond. The diamond helps us change the elevation of the offset values. And then, of course, I've got my boundary, which feels a lot like editing a polyline. So I've got choices there. So if I add a curve, I don't know, let's say 25 feet, there's my 25-foot curve. So there's lots of choices there. What about on the midpoint? So same thing, stretch or add. So we'll just throw a few of these in here real quick, just for the sake of watching it do whatever there, right? So you get the idea. Now taking a look, it almost feels like a grading object, right? If you're looking at it, it sort of feels like it, right? But it's a pond. Okay. What am I trying to do? Add a curve. There we go. Nope. There we go. Okay, so that's a pond. And normally what happens is, I'm going to make a new network here. That's fine. And we'll use my structure with some pipe. My computer doesn't like this particular set of structures. There we go. So we'll pick a big pipe just so that we can see what's happening. And we'll draw the end of the pipe, actually outside of it for the sake of the moment. Because I want to try a couple of different things here, demonstrate. So what is the pond looking for? Is it looking for a structure to connect to? Notice as I move the structure around the pond, nothing is happening. But if I grab the end of the pipe, the pond is acting like a structure. So I guess I don't need that structure physically, just the end of the pipe. Not a flared end section, because a flared end section would still function as a, another structure. So what does that do? So as we're, my elevations are clearly off, but that's okay. The idea is once you connect the pipe to the structure, in this case the pond, just like with a structure, that pipe goes along with it. So whatever happens to that side, right, it's going along for the ride. Okay. So that's the pond object. Let's go back to the top over here. And we'll look at, oops, there's my profile. And let's look at where I'm going to throw this pond in. I'm noticing the time. I'm trying to hurry along here a little bit. So let's do that again. I'll create a pond from scratch. Swale, really. How deep is it? I don't know. That sounds good. Top elevation. 3. I forgot the invert. Oh, there it is. 339. So, and that's down here. So yeah, that's about right. 339 at 6. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. So we'll say the top is 346. We'll go a little deeper, and we'll do 1-to-1 since I've got sort of a narrow area here. Okay, so pick there, and then we'll close it. Throw in some curves. That's going to be too big. That's what I was worried about. Again, I'm kind of just doing this on the fly here. And one more. There we go. Again, I'm not attached, so let's make it attached. Right, something like that. So let's move this guy out of the way for the moment. In fact, oops. Yeah, let's make it do that. There we go. All right, so there is my profile. So this thing does not have a surface. So I mentioned it kind of feels like a grading object. There isn't a property to it. Oops. So like in a grading group, you can toggle on a surface. That's not the case here. But I do see my pond properties. I don't have an outfall pipe just yet, so there's nothing here. But you can see it is connecting. My inlet pipe is connected. And of course, there's my storage. So what can I do? So when you select the pond, there's also a contextual ribbon where I can get some feature lines from the pond, and I can extract them, and we'll do a dynamic link. That's fine. So now in that spot are feature lines. And if I add them to a surface as a break line, we'll call this, I'll leave it the same name, swale. Man, if I could type. Not too concerned about the contours at the moment. Say okay. We'll nut this down a little bit. There we go. And then there's the surface, at least for the inside of my pond. Okay, so that's sort of the intro to the pond. At this point, you would go back and rerun the analysis, right? So here I can pick the pond at this point, right, and start to include that in the process. But that's really what we're doing. There's, I guess I didn't have really too much time to show the swale or the underground storage, but it all works the same way in the scheme of doing the drainage analysis. This analysis is going up to the cloud. Actually, let me cancel. One thing I forgot to mention. You're telling it where to calculate up here with this globe. And there are cloud services running in USA, Great Britain, and Australia to do this analysis. So this does have to be online. I missed that right out of the gate because I'd already had it set up. So when I'm hitting run, it knows where to go to do that. But other than that, everything else is the same. Again, this is a tech preview. This is version 1, if you will. But the part that I love about it, especially if I just limit this to the pipe analysis, right? I could even have put a swale between structures, I suppose, if I had thought about that initially. Just that conveyance system, and then getting it, analyzed and updated if I needed to, all without having to leave Civil 3D is probably the biggest point for me. So while we're waiting for paint to dry here, any last questions?
I got a question for you, Kevin.
Okay.
Can you add the pond so the profile updates showing the pond?
Great question. So the pond itself, let's pick it there. Notice I don't have, normally there'd be some sort of launchpad tool to add to the profile view. The pond object currently can't be added, but certainly I can sample that pond surface. I can cut a surface profile, right? There's nothing fancy about that part. So if I were to take, here's my actual alignment. Let's just stretch it across. And let's do a surface profile, this time of the swale. All right, so that's pretty straightforward. Hit OK, and there's my swale. So old schoolish kind of way to get it in there. So the pond object isn't added just yet, but again, I would imagine it will be in the near future. It's a
One
great
more for
question.
you. Will the analysis tools provide a pre/post analysis of the pond?
Great question. So that's all dependent on your catchment group. So my catchment group, I tend to have three: one for the pipe network, a catchment group for pre, and a catchment group for post. So really, that's what's going to drive that type of analysis, because my catchments are just individual to the inlets. If I were to do like this entire as a post, right? But then I wouldn't do it as a time area, as it calls it, or rational. I would do it as SES. And then I would have an overall time of concentration from here all the way through the pipe system, right through to the pond itself. But otherwise, yeah, it would be the same concept for what I've got here, right? It would just be a new catchment group. We'll call it post. And then let's just fake it here for 2 seconds. If this were going into that group, post, yep. Nothing to really show here because what I want to do is go into the properties of this. And then at that point, we would tell it, hey, this is actually SES, and we would adjust from there. And that's how you would differentiate hydrology versus hydraulic calculations.
I have a follow-up to the pond question.
Okay, go ahead.
When designing the pond, can you add a slope to the bottom so that the pond flow is going to the outlet control structure?
Currently, that is a limitation that has been requested in the beta forums quite frequently, actually. So that actually leads me to a good point. This tool, this Analyze Drainage System tool, this button and these objects are not installed with 26 by default. For those that install software for your company, let's take a quick look here. It's actually a separate install. So, oops, I want all products and services, sorry. So if I click into the product and come to extensions, there's the install for this preview. Secondly, they want and desire lots of folks to join the beta for the design, for the drainage analysis. So this is actually the front page for the Civil 3D beta site, and here's a button. They're trying to drive people specifically to that specific beta. So lots of comments and questions, lots of feedback. You could add some ideas once you've tried this. Hey, would it be great to have a sloped bottom? Let's just see if it's an idea. Variation in side slope, stage from it. So there's some different thoughts in here. I've definitely seen it. I'm just not finding it in my quick search. It might be older than what I'm searching, but this is a great place to start that conversation. Great question, though. Any other? I must be missing it. I was pretty sure there's a void ratio in underground storage. It's not just a box underground. That was my initial expectation there. I seem to recall there being a void ratio. I don't think it had maybe I was looking at the beta version. Maybe. Because infiltration would also be important there. A couple of other factors. Maybe you've got like a contact shape, right? In a gravel bed. So all of that must be coming because I've definitely seen it. It's just not here in the tech preview. So I suppose we can't actually do an LED measure at the moment, but it's on the radar. Sorry, great question. Any other questions?
As of now, Kevin, we're all caught up. No additionals at this point.
Okay, great.